Welcome to The Longer Game, the only show that's dedicated to the future of retail. We bring on real life people in the retail industry. We talk about their experiences, we share their stories, we apply it to what's currently going on in the market, and we look towards the future of retail. You could say it's Retail Reimagined. My name is Michael Marr. I run a customized, done-for-you service agency called Cartology that helps brands win on Amazon. Now, while my expertise stems in the Amazon field, we bring on a wide array of guests because retail is expansive. You've got e-commerce. Yes, you've got marketplaces like Amazon. You've also got brick and mortar that is evolving. You've got logistics. You've got technology, finance. There are so many aspects to retail, and it's complicated. So we're here to bring you the entire story. Do you think that you have an interesting story and you'd like to tell it on the podcast? Then go to thelongergame.com and fill out a form to be a guest on the show today. You can catch The Longer Game on any social channels: LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and our website, thelongergame.com. We've got all awesome guests on this show, so that I will promise. Are you ready to hear more about the future of retail? Let's get down to business. Hey, everybody. Welcome to The Longer Game, the podcast where we talk about all things retail. And we are going to continue to go in the e-commerce, agency, brand side in conjunction with each other chat. And we are talking today with a new friend of mine, Jessie Healy. She's the CMO of Webtopia. Whoa, okay. She's the CMO of Webtopia. And they are helping e-commerce brands to really grow and scale via advertising, something I'm also passionate about as well. Welcome to the show, Jessie. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks. Yeah, it's great to be here. Yeah, so I founded Webtopia about 6 years ago out of frustration, really, with my experience of agencies that I'd been having myself. So I'd been previously in my career worked purely brand side, worked with a number of kind of consumer brands over the years. And then my last kind of big job was at Etsy, heading up the performance marketing outside of the US. And I had the same experience with agencies over and over, which was that they talked a big game, but then you ended up with a very junior team running your campaigns, not much strategy, just a lot of button pushing that didn't get you anywhere. So that's why I founded Webtopia. Um, so yeah,
You call Webtopia the anti-agency.
yeah, we
Tell me a little bit more about that, because I know that's a pain point for a lot of brands that are listening. They've had a bad agency experience, and as someone who runs and owns an agency, that one, I get that. I get why that would happen. Two, it's frustrating for me. It makes my sales process harder, which is okay. I mean, I'm good for the challenge, but the thing that I think is really crazy is it makes it hard for the people who can actually help these brands who are capable. It prevents a wall. So they've got, just like being in a relationship, you're scarred from that relationship. It takes time. You have to get past resentment. You have to make sure you don't carry resentment from a past relationship over to that new person. So,
yeah.
and as someone who's been married for 15 years, I get that. I know it takes a lot of work just even in that own relationship. So, yeah, tell me a little bit more about anti-agency. Maybe some of the you talked about talking a big game, not really being able to back it up.
Yeah.
Maybe share a little bit more about that would be
Yeah,
would be
so
helpful. Maybe just cathartic for people too.
yeah, true. So the experience I had when selecting agencies, when I was in my career working client side, was that they would send in these really experienced, like strategic people who would talk to you about all the strategic stuff they were going to do and like all the things they'd done for other brands. And then invariably you would get assigned your account manager and then you would never see those people again. And I would find my role client side was to be paid a good salary to keep my eye on the agency and to hold them to task. And I was probably a nightmare client in some ways because I saw that as my role of like, what are you doing today? What are you going to do this week? Really keeping on their back the whole time. And it shouldn't be like that. The agency is being paid to have an opinion, to have expertise, to drive your growth. And I wanted to create an agency where the client didn't have to chase the agency to make things happen or drive the strategy or challenge them the whole time to come up with new ideas, that the agency would be like a true partner and an extension of the brand, and able to actually bring the ideas and bring the strategy and then, co-create together, um, rather than just being like the people pushing the buttons and the brand is kind of driving everything, which was my experience. And the reason it had to be like that is because the agencies I worked with, would assign me very junior people. They'd be 1 or 2 years out of college. They weren't experienced marketers. They weren't confident in their knowledge. They knew how to use the platform, which I didn't at the time know how to use. So I had to rely on them for that knowledge. And I think that's the problem. The platforms aren't actually that hard to figure out once you know where all the buttons sit. The hard part is the strategy. The hard part is figuring out, how do we reach this customer and convince them to buy, and who is the customer in the first place? And so I wanted to create an agency that would really help brands that were in that early stage, that didn't know maybe, or rightly so, didn't know as much about marketing as their agency. And the agency would be able to come to them with really fantastic ideas and strategies that would actually work.
I was going to say something that's kind of a devil's advocate here, but is there a role that the agency did play that they did? Like, when I'm hearing this, I'm thinking, okay, why even hire an agency if they're not doing anything?
I mean,
Like, was there a role that they were playing? You said they knew the platform better, so they were able to push some buttons, but they weren't really helping you to drive results, right?
so in the case of, in my particular case, like I was working for bigger established brands. So yes, they were driving results because, a big brand has a big budget and generally gets big
Okay.
results. Um, and it's a really great question though. In the case of, one of the bigger brands I worked with, we're spending 1 million a month. Um, so what was the agency doing? It's almost like they were providing like a safety net in terms of, like, the right spend would happen, the right buttons would be pushed, the right reports would be pulled, the APIs would be connected properly, and that kind of technical knowledge when you're running a big account that doesn't necessarily sit within the client, the brand side. Although arguably, maybe it should once you get to that size of you're spending 1 million a month. Like, do you actually need an agency, or should you just build a team in house that has that expertise so that you're end to end controlling it? I would argue that's probably true. I've got some opinions about when agencies come into play and can really help a brand grow, and then when it's actually best to then potentially go in house. Um, but yeah, so in the case of some of those brands, we probably should have been in house, but that just wasn't the strategy that I was handed.
It could be a really expensive safety net.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Was that, that agency was being paid £32,000 a month.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I would actually love to hear some of your ideas on bringing something in house, because those are really the two options you have. It's bring it in house, or do it in house, or hire an agency.
Yeah.
And when I was an e-commerce seller, I was doing everything on my own. I was doing everything internally. Could I benefited from someone helping me? Yes. But thinking about the cost of doing that and not really knowing or having a guarantee that performance would, actually work well, or their performance would just even happen. Uh, and some of the pitches that I got didn't make sense, like software companies that were like, we'll send your catalog to multiple sites and we're going to charge it 3,000 and a percent of sales. And I'm like, wait, but like my stuff's already live on these sites. So how is that
Yeah.
helping me? That was always a pet peeve of mine. But I do sales for my agency now, and I'm pitching my services to people, but it really has to be intentional in terms of like, can I really help you or not? But long story short, you either have to do it in house or you have to hire someone. And the reason you would hire an agency is because it's not as expensive as hiring a really knowledgeable person. But if the agency isn't providing the knowledge anyway, doesn't make sense to if you're a big agency, I think, or a big company, I think you're right. Just hire someone that's very knowledgeable, especially if they're spending ad money, pay them a good amount to drive results for your business. Give them a little bit of autonomy,
Yeah.
and let them go. But if you're growing an emerging brand, you do, and especially if you're wanting to be across multiple channels, you can't be an expert in all those
No,
channels. You have to be an expert of your
exactly.
brand.
And the problem is when people try to hire it in-house too soon and they try and get this person who's doing Google ads, Facebook ads, organic social media, email marketing, they're never going to be able to be good at all of those, even if
I was
they
just
are
going to say
really
that's a lot of different specialties. When I
totally.
hear that, it's
You know,
it's
and
too
like in
much.
our
It's too
agency, we
many.
have a team for each thing and they spend all day obsessing and learning.
Yep.
Like, how could someone do that well? Even if that with the best will in the world and the smartest person, they couldn't. So I think there's that middle phase when you're growing and when you're not big enough to have an email specialist, a Google specialist, an SEO specialist, or an SEO team and a Google team, etc. Then that's when you need specialist agencies. And so that kind of scaling up phase for going from, seven figures to eight or even, yeah, once you're in the nine figures, that's definitely when in-house starts to be really make a lot more sense. Once you've got enough going on per channel to have a full-time person on that channel, I think that's a moment when you can consider the in-house route. But I would also say in that early stage or like the smaller stage when you were doing it all yourself, there's a hybrid that can work, which is something that I've kind of addressed with my coaching program where we have it done with you. So we're giving you the knowledge and expertise. We're holding your hand a little bit. We're helping you with the strategy, but at a much lower price point than what an agency costs you. So you kind of have that confidence to know that you've got, someone's kind of helping guide you and helping you figure it out, but you're not having to pay so much of your monthly marketing budget to an agency when you don't have, the funds to do that. So
It
I
could
think
also
there's a
be like how
hybrid.
scrappy. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, how scrappy do you want your team to be too? Like maybe you want your team to be a little bit leaner, and you're okay with hiring an agency if you've got more revenue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's different models, but yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think one big mistake brands make is trying to in-house too soon. Um, and then that poor person just ends up not doing anything particularly well and the brand doesn't grow.
Yeah. Well, then they've got a lot of onus on them, and there's a reason why my agency, which is more boutique, that's a nice way of saying smaller, right? But it's a boutique agency, but we focus and specialize right now on Amazon because it is its own world. And you'll probably laugh at this, but I've had people in the past say, aren't you going to add in like Shopify and stuff like that? And I'm like, no, it's like saying, oh, you speak Japanese, aren't you going to also add French to your repertoire? And I'm like, if I want to learn another language, like it's a language, it's similar, but it's not the same.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I get the same thing where people try and convince me that we should take, like a friend of my mum was launching a book and she was like, "You can do my marketing." I was like, "I literally cannot." Like, I do not know how to
Yeah.
market a book. Could I learn this language? Yes. Would I know where to go and find that information? Probably. Do I want to learn a whole new language for one client? No. I'm a specialist in e-com and product brands and I know how to, grow and scale them. Launching an author and a book is a whole different world.
I've done that on Amazon, and there are some similarities, and we have actually a couple author clients, but it is a much different pathway.
Yeah.
The budgets are typically a lot smaller. Getting results takes a longer time, and I think a lot of it is just that whole vehicle for books. A lot of people rely upon traditional publishers, on traditional marketing outside of Amazon, and not many people are pushing on Amazon, although there are a lot of people searching for stuff, but a lot of times they're searching directly for a book or something very generic like fiction for eighth graders.
Yeah.
And so it's like either very specific or very general. People talk about, long tail stuff. Maybe there isn't super long tail stuff. Maybe it's how do I compete in generic, or how do I compete against someone that is an actual competitor of mine.
Mm, interesting. Yeah, I mean, you'd be more well equipped to help my mum's friend than I was, given the Amazon. But I like don't even know about Amazon, so it was really a non-starter.
One of the things that when brands are hearing this are going to be thinking about is kind of transitioning out of holiday mode, out of Q4, and heading into the dark, dreary month of January. I just say that because that's typically when My wife and daughter and I do not have a vacation plan, but we try to quickly plan something so
Yeah.
that we can get out again and enjoy. We just like to take trips and travel, even if it's something small for a weekend or something like that. We like. Don't get me wrong. I would love to take like a 3 week vacation, but that time is has not come yet. But people are going to be transitioning. Brands are going to be transitioning into that January timeframe, and for some brands, there's going to be a big drop off. I've looked at several businesses recently, several brands on Amazon specifically, and they've got super high seasonality, like huge peak summer months where sales go up 500% and then drop back down. And you can't keep spending on ads during that time period like you would because there is a cap on market potential. Now, during that peak season, I'd say lean into it. I'm curious to know your thought though, because some brands are going to see a peak season, like supplement brands in January, February, huge time for them. But other brands that are very gift focused, they're going to start to drop off. How can brands navigate that time and really maximize what they've got, knowing they're going to see a decline and not see stuff go up and to the right?
Yeah, so there's a few things going on here at this time of year. So when this episode comes out, we might still be in the peak period slightly. So whenever your shipping cutoff is before like Christmas Day, you want to
Yeah.
be really clear with your customers, with your email list when that cutoff is, and your advertising should be really focused on that urgency of getting the order in before that cutoff day comes. So what you don't want is for your sales to kind of drop off straight after Black Friday. You want to keep them up here for at least another couple of weeks. So one thing that's really important, if you haven't already, like it might be a little late, but we always really encourage our clients to have a bank of creative ready for after Black Friday. Like it doesn't all end at Black Friday, right? And that's really focused around gifting and getting people to, if they've bought during Black Friday, they might buy again from you for their family, for their friends, etc. So making sure all of your post-purchase flows and everything are much faster, that are targeted around like that gifting angle rather than the self-purchase. So that's a little trick for that kind of just this last little period we've got heading into the holiday. Then you've got what people call Q5, which is just after Christmas or even on Christmas Day. People actually shop again. So things go very
Interesting.
quiet in that week just before Christmas because people are no longer online shopping. They're shopping in stores or they're, cooking and buying food and all of that stuff. But then once Christmas Day hits, people are at home, they're on their phones,
Yeah.
they are escaping from their family, whatever it might be.
They've
Uh,
got some downtime
they've
from
got
all
some
the hustle
downtime.
and bustle of things.
Exactly. And in the UK, we call it Twixmas. There's this period between Christmas and New Year where people like basically don't leave their pajamas and they're hanging out with the family. Maybe in
Twixmas. Tell me more about that.
yeah, it's just the period between Christmas and New Year. And because in the UK there's a lot of most businesses shut, there's a lot of like annual leave, not annual leave, bank holidays, statutory holidays, I don't know what you call them. That period,
Okay.
typically people have that time off. So there's a lot of online activity. There's a lot of Boxing Day sales that they're
Okay.
called. But I'm sure in the States as well, there's those post Christmas sales that you can run to kind of boost sales in that Q5 period. So just after Christmas, heading into January. So having a plan and a strategy for that is really important. And then you go into January itself. Now, the cool thing about January is traffic gets a lot cheaper. So, because a lot of brands pull back, a lot of big brands pull back, traffic's cheaper, but consumer intent is lower, so conversion rates are lower. Now, depending on your brand category, this could be a fantastic time for you, or it could be a time to pull back. So, supplements, health related products, yeah, travel. There's a bunch of categories that do really, really well at this time of year. And so again, having a strategy all planned out, having your creative planned out so that you're really poised to kind of pounce on it is important. And then for those that it's not your season to shine, if you're more of a product that's much more giftable and much more focused around Q4, then yeah, you don't want to keep spending if your performance isn't showing you that you should be. But what I would also say is, maybe you use this time for lead generation or for nurturing audiences or capturing, educating your customers. You don't want to go away completely from advertising because you are teaching the algorithm, you're gathering data, you're kind of priming people for your higher peak season time. So yes, you should follow the numbers and like pull back when it's not working for you, but I would not pull back completely in this month because you want to take advantage of that cheap traffic, and there will be still people around who do want to buy from you.
One of the things that I see brands do is, and it's very unique to Amazon, but when you spend money on advertising, there is a strong correlation. We can't always show causation, but there is a strong correlation between your ad spend and your total sales.
Yeah.
And a big part of it is because when you spend, especially everything that's very search engine keyword based, so if you search red sweater and someone purchases a red sweater off of your ad, Amazon search algorithm will say this product is very high, sellability. I don't know if that's a word, but high sellability with this red sweater keyword. It doesn't matter that it happened on an ad because that ad is still part of their product catalog.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to start to show it, or there's greater likelihood that it will start to show higher in organic search results as well.
Yeah.
And there's some cases where we've even been able to show we spent $1 on ads and it actually increased organic sales alone by 60 cents for that,
Wow.
not including ads, just an additional 60 cents of organic sales on top of it. So there's a problem where brands they'll spend a lot for like a month and say, well, we didn't see the results they want. And then they stop or they pull back because, we can't sustain this. And what they don't realize is they have to be tracking these tertiary metrics like what is your sales rank? What is your rank in search results? Are you starting to see greater, what we might consider market share on these terms? Are you converting higher? And that Amazon releases a lot more of this data. So brands will push really hard for a little bit and then they'll pull back. Do you see that same thing on your side?
Certainly in terms of like the client mindset, yes, there's some clients who will be very kind of focused on the platform metrics. So what is the like meta platform telling us the performance is versus actually the better way to look at it is like you say, the overall revenue figure and how does that correlate with the spend. So if
Like
we've
people
pulled
want
back,
instant ROI.
yeah, yeah.
That's kind of what I'm getting at is like okay, we're not seeing a RoAS right now, but is there an overarching story that's tying into brand, like you said, that's tying into the total revenue number?
Exactly, yeah. So we think it's really important to also always be looking at what's the total revenue I've driven for the amount of spend that I spent. We call that like, you could call it blended return on ad spend or blended customer acquisition cost. And that's going to ultimately be your North Star metric to tell you whether is this money I'm spending on these platforms actually driving me revenue? Or is it actually I'm driving up the spend, but the revenue's not following, therefore I need to actually adjust.
One of the things that we see, especially on search terms, if you want to rank, or for people that are listening, like basically just show up higher in search results on Amazon. If you want to rank for that term, you'll go really hard, high bids, try and get as many impressions, as many clicks, and just start getting as many conversions as possible, even if your return looks bad. But as you start to show up higher in search results and you push forward, you start to see better return. You don't have to spend as much long term to stay high on that search result because you're already paid to get there. You're already getting the conversions more so than everybody else. But sometimes it takes a long time to get there. It might take 6 months, 9 months, a year to get in that spot if it's a really competitive category. Like anything in beauty, be ready to see a really low return for at least the first 6 months. Like just be prepared. Don't expect to be profitable within the first year, maybe even longer depending upon where you're at, unless your margins are just crazy good. And even then, don't expect to be profitable. But that takes time. That takes patience. As an anti-agency, how do you walk people through and help them? Because you said the strategy piece is really difficult. They need to be able to see the forest for the trees.
Mm-hmm.
So the strategy piece, if you just go in and start pushing buttons, you don't see great results. Okay, well, let's pull off. Like, we're just doing these small tests. But if because you're a platform expert and an ad spend expert, we need to do this because of what we can see long term. How do you hold people's hand or just keep them a little more comfortable? They probably won't be comfortable, but how do you keep them a little bit more comfortable during that time period and get them to hold on?
Yeah. So there's a few things. So typically in the agency, we wouldn't work with a brand that was freshly launching for the first time, right? They would already have some product market fit and have been running ads, maybe in-house or with a smaller agency, and then they would come to us and we would like sort it out and get them really kind of scaling up. Uh, However, from time to time, we will work with a brand new launch if we know there's like runway to, like you say, invest in the time required to get to profitability. And if that were the case, we typically say, there's at least 3, maybe even 4 or 5 months of ramp up where we're figuring out, because if it is a new launch, we're testing product market fit, website, landing page, creative, audience, um, brand, the brand itself. So any one of those things could be what, if it's not working, which one's not working? How do you eliminate which of those it is? So that's the challenge. And I guess one of the reasons we don't necessarily work with brands that are just getting started is there's a sixth variable that they tend to jump on, which is it the agency? Is that the fault? It can't be my product, it can't be my website. It must be
Yeah.
the agency's fault. Let's go try another agency and have the same result again. So but that's why my coaching program exists, because I think early stage startup brands, they need more than just ads, right? They need, like I said, they need to fix all of those other pieces of the marketing system. So they need to make sure they have, user generated content, they need to have social proof, they need to have a website that follows kind of the what people expect to see, consumers need to see to be convinced. They need to have a really strong story. They need to have, organic social working. There's so many pieces. So if a brand is fairly new, we get them to come into the coaching program. We help them get all of those pieces set up. And then, yeah, I think from zero to hero, with if none of those things are in place, you're probably looking similar to what you're saying, like a year of really working on it and tweaking each element to get to that point where, right, now let's off to the races, we can scale this puppy.
People that are really close to a product brand, they need outside perspective. You need someone that's a little bit more objective. I mean, I guess you don't know it's totally objective, but someone a little more objective that can help them pick stuff apart. And there are people, like you said, who say, "It can't be my product. It can't be that." But as soon as you, I mean, I can take this from a personal level and say, when you stop blaming other people and you say, "Okay, what can I work on? What can I do to better contribute to the relationship that I'm in?" I swear this is not a psychology podcast, but sometimes we talk about, real life stuff. And if I just think about myself and my wife and I say, okay, I'm frustrated in this situation right here, can't control her. What can I do in this situation to help? And that's a start. And as soon as you let go of that pride, so the same thing is true of a brand owner. As soon as you let go of that pride, you actually start talking about issues and discovering issues. And guess what? They might get fixed. They will not get fixed if you don't talk about it. It's very unlikely that they will get fixed. But as soon as you start talking about them, you start to work through some of those issues and it becomes a lot healthier. So if brand owners don't have anyone to say, "Hey, I think this is a problem that we really need to look at," and the same is true for service owners or service providers like myself. I bring in coaches. I have people that come and coach me and say, "Hey, you really need to look at this. You need to think about this. This is something that can help you improve because I need an outside perspective. I know Amazon really well, but could someone else help me run my operations better?" Sure, I'm open to that. As soon as you let down your guard in that sense, it allows you to have a lot more, allows you to actually improve.
Yeah. You sound like you would be a great client. When we're looking for a client, we want someone who, yeah, who has that growth mindset, who wants to sit side by side at the table and figure out together this problem of getting them that we're on the same page. We both want them to grow. We're going to grow if you grow. Ultimately, your success, Mr. Client, is our success. So let's sit down at the table side by side and let's figure this puzzle out. And those clients that are willing to do that, they're the ones that win, they're the ones that grow, and they're the ones that we love working with and get excited about. So I guess that's the anti-agency in a nutshell, is we're not here just to like push the buttons for you and shrug our shoulders. We're here to get, to roll our sleeves up with you in the trenches together. Um, and that's where we think the best results come. And it's the most fun.
It is a lot of fun when someone hires you for advice and then they actually listen to you. The worst thing is you hire someone and then you just fight everything they say. There's nothing wrong with critical discourse, but just saying, okay, it's like I hire you and I pay you to help me, and then I don't trust anything you say, and now we're basically order takers for you. That doesn't help you at all. And when stuff like that starts to happen, it feels like the beginning of the end. I try to, seek that out or find that out beforehand, but it feels like the beginning of the end. But I try to warn people, you do this we're very much expecting this thing to happen, because one of the things that I think most agencies get wrong is the communication piece. You want to be a partner with someone, you have to communicate with them. Slack has been a game changer for us, just creating channels specifically for our clients where they can talk back and forth with us. We can deliver assets to them. They can ask us a question and tag us. We can respond a lot quicker, and it's a lot less intensive than, say, email. The load time is typically less. Sometimes, email providers can take a while to load, especially if you got 100 different threads on the same email. So that communication piece is huge. So I try to get out in front of that and say, this is going to be a problem. Like, just be aware. And then when that happens, it doesn't feel like they're blindsided by it. But when I hire someone, I know what it's like to be hired. And my hope is always like, I want to be a case study for you. I want to be someone that can turn around. You can say, we took this person from here to here, and they saw, a huge improvement because they listened to my advice. I don't care. I mean, I like being right, I guess, but I don't always need to be the one that's right. I just want to make sure that I'm actually, like, I hired someone for a reason. Implement the feedback, take it, run with it, and actually see improvement.
Yeah.
It's the most ideal client provider fit.
Yeah.
And I think it makes I know it makes the service provider want to work for you that much harder and want to see you win. Not that they don't want to see other people win, but it's like, man, this person's gets it. How do I make them just have that little extra edge?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think people are doing wrong with creative in advertising?
So, in a nutshell, really, they're just not doing the work. They're not doing the hard things that are going to get them the great creative. And I see this a lot with brands that I mentor, even some of our like agency clients as well. You know, the best creative requires work. It requires you to dig deep to understand your customer. You need to be talking to your customers regularly. You need to be surveying them, but you also need to be getting on the phone with them and asking them. You need to be looking at what they're doing on your website and where they're getting stuck, and finding out why. And that deep understanding of the customer is what will unlock creative that compels more people to become customers. So doing that work first and foremost. And then I guess there's frameworks that you can then apply to that insight and that knowledge. So how I kind of approach it is, or how we approach it in the agency is, first of all, figure out what are those angles, or yeah, what are those angles that and reasons why someone buy. What is the pain point the product solves, and what is the compelling reason why that customer wants to buy from you and not from anyone else. So once you've kind of encapsulated that, well, then what framework or creative framework can I use to communicate that? And there's lots out there that already exist, so you don't need to necessarily reinvent the wheel initially. So it might be, using like a TikTok 3 reasons why, or TikTok made me buy it, or uh, there's a post-it note ad. There's so many kind of frameworks that people are using successfully. You apply your customer insight and your angle to the framework, having user-generated reviews, unboxings. There's so many frameworks you can apply to the insight, and then you create the creative, but then you test and iterate. Like, you test different, like, opening hooks, you test different sequences within that creative. So there's a lot of work that goes into that to get to the ultimately good creative. And one of the big pieces of work is getting user content. So one of the things I see people sort of, especially in the early days, this is what sets apart for me, like, a successful brand that's going to be able to scale to 7, 8, 9 figures, and one that might just keep floundering, is they're not willing to do the work to get that super high quality social proof in the form of user generated content. And in the early days, yes, it is really hard. You don't have a lot of customers you can ask for reviews. So you have to go out and you have to kind of pay people to do UGC for you or pay actors, etc. And you have to figure out who's the best people to do this for you and how to get them to sound authentic. And you have to script it, and you have to, there's a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of trial and error, and it takes a lot of time. And I think brands want someone to do their ads. They want ads to just be something easy you create in Canva and then off to the races. And they
Are you
kind of
saying
like
it's not that easy?
actually, the button pushing is much easier these days than it used to be. It used to be this whole complicated thing with like millions of different audiences and A/B tests and all of that. Now it's just double down on the creative, work really hard on understanding your customer, do the really hard, heavy lifting that you need to get creative that uses real people and is, eye catching and attention grabbing and taps into like a human insight, uses psychology. So brands that are, what are they not doing? What are they doing badly? Is they're avoiding the work.
Creative. When I see people, they think of creative, it's like, let's just use a bunch of stock stuff.
Yeah.
Or let's just, photograph some stuff, use Photoshop and use this stuff on a white background, and that's it. And there's a lot you can do from a creative standpoint. At a certain point, though, my question would be, why are you not wanting to invest more in better creative assets? Because you can only, I think, create as good of content as your actual raw assets. So if you have no real lifestyle photos of your product, even anything that just makes sense from a brand. Like we have a client who they have a product that's more kid focused, and they have a picture of their product in like a bowl of gummy bears. Like that, and it's their brand is really bright colors. Like it's genius. And I mean that
Yeah.
wasn't my idea, but
And it
it's
could be
great.
shot on
It's
a
like,
phone. Like again, a lot of this
okay,
stuff is like it's work, but you have to you have to do it. Like you have to get your phone out, you have to figure out the lighting, and you have to do it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be high production value, but you have to take time. Yeah.
I would even say, and you correct me if I'm wrong. I'm open to be wrong on this, but for UGC, the less produced, the better.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you don't want it to be over. I'm not saying you want it to be trash. Like I'm not saying get an old Moto Razor and start recording video on that. But it doesn't need to be overly produced. And my thought process there is, you just want it to be relatable. And as soon as it becomes overproduced, super celebrity, people might want and attain that, but it becomes less
Yeah.
relatable to them.
Yeah. There's a little bit of a meme going around DTC Twitter, which is about ugly ads, and you should use ugly ads because ugly ads work better than highly produced ads. And look, I'm not team ugly exactly. Like I work with a lot of fashion brands, that they need to have a certain aesthetic to convince people, that they want to aspire to this, to buy from this brand. But having said that, the point is like lo-fi, shot on a phone, even in fashion, that definitely works. People want to imagine this on a real person. They don't necessarily want to just see it on a model. So trying that kind of creative that purposely looks much more native and ugly, quote unquote, if you will, is definitely something brands should have in their repertoire. And hey, look, if the founder or the head of brand is worried about it, just say, look, we're gonna do 1,000 impressions. 1,000 strangers are going to see this ad and no one else. And if it does well, then you decide whether you want to run it or not. And if you're getting like a 5 RoAS on this ad, chances are the brand person might be overruled by the finance person who actually wants
Right.
to make some money.
Exactly. That's exactly what happens. What's crazy is I was about to ask you, are you team ugly ads or not? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Because I've seen those comments on DTC Twitter where
Yeah,
people are like going all in on ugly ads. And I think people have this idea of price point and a brand, and it needs to be this. If I'm creating a brand that I really love, it has to be something that is just this really high level. And the reality is there's a lot of people in a lot of different categories. And why couldn't you, if you have a fashion brand, why couldn't it be something that's more accessible from a price point standpoint? Could it be high? Like that could be an untapped audience. And at the end of the day, when you're running ads, if something works, it works. Why would you care? If people are relating to it by purchasing, why would you care how they get there? Like,
Yeah.
it just seems
They've
kind of,
given a stranger off the internet their money because they're so keen to have this product in their hands. That tells you that this ad is doing the job that the brand wants it to do. So yeah, I'm not on any team, but I'm willing to test anything to, to get the best result for my client. And so I believe that you should test every style of ad. And actually, it's something that Facebook's talking a lot about at the moment. They call it creative diversity. And what you don't want in your ad account is lots of ads that look the same because you can't scale. Whereas if you have diverse ad types, then, the person who wants the polished ad, they'll see the polished ad. The person who really likes raw and ready ads, they will see that ad, and that's what will convince them. And Facebook knows a lot about us and what we like to see and consume. So, so yeah, I think having a diversity of ads in your ad account is the name of the game.
Amazon's been talking a lot about that as well, like having diversity in your creative. And I think that makes a lot of sense because you could have people in different demographics that like your product. I mean, depending upon what it is, if you have like a natural food product, you could have people who don't have high income. You could have people that have
Yeah,
high income. Like you might think of having a target audience, but like I said, whatever resonates with those people is what resonates. This may sound kind of crazy, but the church that I go to in my town, they have a saying, and they say, "We will do anything short of sin to get people to know God," which is crazy. It sounds very crazy, and it's
wow.
when I'm thinking of I'm thinking of this like anything short of sin, so not sin, but it's the same idea of like, I mean, a lot of people have been judged by people who believe in God, and so they're saying we don't want to do that. If having an event where we serve beer or drinks and food inside of church and it invites people and it gets people in, we want to do that. And that, I think, is the problem that a lot of brands have, is they think I need to be this certain level of like aristocracy. And it's like, get people in the door, and if they resonate with your message, let them buy your product. You don't always get to determine. You might have an idea of who your avatar is, but you don't get to determine who your end user is if they like your product. I mean, you can determine it by shutting down your business if they're buying, but why would you want to do that?
Yeah, exactly. That's so true. There's a certain democracy to it, isn't there? People choose. I think people sometimes forget that this is a human being with a free will who's choosing to buy your product or not.
Right? Yeah, it's not a machine. It's not like you just game the system and say, if I spend,
Yeah,
like if I simply build it, people will come. That's not always the case.
yeah, yeah,
As much
totally.
as people may like that Kevin Costner movie, that just because you build it doesn't mean that they'll come
Yeah,
in the show, or that they might come, but it doesn't mean that they'll resonate
yeah,
with it or that it'll actually speak to them. So audience, you can have an idea of who it is, but like if it hits with someone, that's part of why I think pivoting is so powerful. You go towards that person. You go towards the person it's actually working with.
yeah, yeah.
Jessie, this has been fun. If people want to know more about you, where should they go and look? Should they be looking for someone creating more anti-groups, more anti-things
Yeah.
against the establishment? Where can people find out more about what Jessie Healy's doing?
Yeah, probably the best place to find me is on LinkedIn. So search my name, Jessie Healy, on LinkedIn. And I post on there most days. I've got content on there, and I hang out on Twitter a little bit as well. So Jessie Webtopia on Twitter. I think it's Jessie underscore Webtopia. I should know that, but yeah, Jessie Healy on Twitter. You'll find me on there too. And yeah, and you can drop me an email on hello@webtopia.co. And actually, I've got a free ad swipe file if anyone wants to get their hands on that. Drop me an email and I'll send that to you with all of we update it regularly, all of our favorite best performing ads from both inside the agency and what we've come across online.
Cool. Well, we'll make sure to include that stuff in the show notes as well, so people can find out more about you and what you're up to. But thanks for coming on, everyone out there. If you learned anything today, it's that you got to do the hard work in anything when it comes to creative. Relationships take work. You don't always get to determine who your audience is, and that's all we got. We'll catch you next time. All right, that was the show. What did you think? That was the longer game. We would love for you to share the show with other people and to leave us a review of the show. So go to iTunes, go to Spotify, you can go to YouTube, comment, leave a review, and share this on any social channels that you're active on and wherever you have influence. We want to share this story and stories like it to as many people as possible. Do you have a compelling story and do you want to come on the podcast and talk about it, and you're in the retail industry? Then go to thelongergame.com, fill out a form, and we will contact you about coming on the show. You can find us on any social channels, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and you can go to our website, thelongergame.com, to actually read all of these episodes in blog form in text, because we know not everyone's going to listen. This podcast is brought to you by my agency, Cartology. We are a customized, done-for-you service agency that helps brands win on Amazon. It is super complex selling on the Amazon Marketplace. We help simplify that for you. This podcast is also brought to you by Podcastify Me. They are a full-service podcast production company that designs podcasts around people who are paid for their advice. That is coaches. If you want someone to help create, strategize, and distribute your podcast to the masses, go to podcastify.me to find out more. I've so enjoyed that you've been a part of the conversation and that you've given of your time to hear these people's stories. We'd love for you to share. If you want to find out more, just go to thelongergame.com. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Stay blessed. And until next time, cheers.